Welcome everyone to our panel discussion today called Starting a Small Business, brought to you by the Office of Alumni Relations. My name is Rachel Anderson. I am a graduate of the S.J. Quinney College of Law at the University of Utah, and I'm the chair of the Alumni Board of Governors Committee on Networking and Careers. I'm glad to welcome our 3 alumni business owners today and our entrepreneurship expert from the David Eccles School of Business. So first off, let's meet our panelists. First, we have Farah Osmi, who graduated from the U with a BS in finance and is currently pursuing an MBA at Harvard. Her previous work experience includes an investment banker at Barclays, working on consumer retail M&A, and corporate strategist at Tommy Hilfiger. She is passionate about supporting women and giving back to her community. Farah, thank you for joining us. Please give us a brief introduction to you and Ixora Apparel that you own.
Hey, thanks for having me. Ixora Apparel, we're looking to deliver made-to-measure apparel where clothes are made for her and her body and not made to stock. So what does made for you actually mean? I know as many women, we have trouble when we go to the clothing store. We get 3 different brands, and a size 2 means completely different things across these different brands. So these clothes are actually made for your body, utilizing your measurements, so you never have to guess what size you are. And what does not to stock mean? Everyone knows apparel industry is one of the most pollutive industries in the world. We're looking to eliminate that by reducing the need of inventory. We are only making clothes whenever people want them and not actually producing a year out and thinking in a year that it'll actually sell. So that's just a little bit about Ixora Apparel.
Awesome, that's so interesting. Thanks, Farah. Next, we have Trisha Banyan, who majored in history at the U with a minor in economics. She opened the first nailed salon in 2004. Trisha, glad to have you with us today. Tell us what sets nailed salons apart from its competitors.
Muted.
Trisha, you're muted.
I'm so sorry. So
that's okay.
I've been doing too many of these meetings and getting loose. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you having me on. I opened Nailed to be a competitor to the express salons that were popping up in every strip mall and on the street corners. A lot of the viewers may not be old enough to remember a time when you only to get a pedicure, you had to go to an expensive salon or a spa, and you had to make your appointment a week ahead, and they were like $100. And just by way of showing, I was 40 years old before I had my first pedicure. But one day I was sitting with my daughter who was 10 years old and getting a pedicure with her. And I looked around and there was an 18-year-old and another girl who was like 23. And the idea popped in my head that there was a brand new market that hadn't existed 10 years ago. And I thought to myself, somebody could do it better. They could do a walk-in salon where the ambiance was better and the hygienic standards were better, and it was a hipper, more fun place to be, and yet keep the price point more reasonable. So that's what I opened, hoping to accomplish those goals. And it was a huge learning curve. I'd never even had a manicure before I opened my salon, so I had a lot to learn. And over the years, it's been, I've had a lot of setbacks in my road, but it's been very fun, and it's been a business model that people in the Salt Lake community have really responded to. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. I've actually been to your salon. I love it. It's really nice.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to introduce Leslie Corbett. She graduated from the U with a major in psychology and a minor in sociology. Thank you, Leslie, for sharing your experience and advice today. Tell us about your entry into the drive-up coffee business.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. So Bjorn's Brew. Bjorn's is a local drive-through coffee shop. Bjorn's was previously owned. My husband and I purchased it when it was just a very small shop on Foothill Drive. We owned the property that Bjorn's was built, and we were getting ready to put a hotel on the property behind it. And the business owner of Bjorn's at the time didn't necessarily want to survive through the construction. So we asked if he was interested in selling it to us, and he was. And my husband, as long as I have known him, had always wanted to do coffee. So years later, here it came to us, it was presented to us, and it was an opportunity, and the timing was perfect for both of us. So we kind of hit the ground running and learned every aspect of coffee, including making drinks, every part of the deliveries. I feel like if you're going to be a business owner, you need to know every part of it. And we finally, after all those years of being married, our dream of doing coffee came true.
That is really interesting. I love how both you and Trisha have stories where you weren't necessarily experts in the topic before you opened the business. That's really interesting. Our fourth panelist is Lyda Bigelow. She's the an associate professor and a faculty fellow in the David Eccles School of Business. Lyda, we're glad to have you represent the business support opportunities and services that the U offers our alumni. So tell us a little bit about the Department of Entrepreneurship and Strategy. Oh, you're muted too, Lyda.
Thank you very much for having me on as well. And I'm like you, I'm really impressed with the women on your panel and their ability to dive in and pursue their dream of starting a small business. And who knows, many of those businesses may grow significantly over time. I know here at the David Eccles School of Business, in our entrepreneurship group, we have a lot of programs and activities and classes and speaker series. And many of them, of course, are designed for our current students, students across campus, but we also have opportunities to have individuals from outside the university come and attend some of these events. Many of them may be hosted in Lasan Studios, which is a beautiful, unusual space designed to bring the classroom, the actual activities involved in starting a business, speakers, machines, support services together in one place. And in addition, there may be some in the audience who are really serious about starting a venture, and one program that is designed specifically for them. It's a very new, innovative program that we launched just last year. It's called our Masters in Business Creation. And what we offer is essentially a 9-month hands-on, in-depth training with faculty as well as advisors who have clinical appointments in the entrepreneurship and strategy group to help those fledgling entrepreneurs get their business off the ground.
That's fabulous, Lyda. Thank you. I'm so excited that the university has such strong resources for our students and community.
And if I can just add, the Princeton Review rankings just came out. And
awesome.
Our undergrad program was ranked 10th in the country for entrepreneurship.
Oh, wow.
And the graduate program was ranked 16th. So we're really proud of that.
Yeah, that's super impressive. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to just jump right in to this panel discussion. I have several questions I'm going to be asking all of you today. Before I get started on that, I just want to note, I just read that we have around 45 people who signed up for this that should be viewing this. But I thought it was interesting that they're ranging from the class of 1971 through the class of 2024. So we have quite a wide range of viewers here. And for those that are not aware, this is being recorded for YouTube and can be viewed afterwards. And we typically get hundreds of watches after the fact. So this will be super interesting for people of all stripes. My first question, let's start by answering one of the audience questions about step one. Is there any guide to write a best business plan that the panelists can recommend? Lyda, how would you answer that?
So the first thing that I would recommend, and this is echoed in the comments of our business owners and entrepreneurs here, is that you really need to be totally steeped in, dedicated to living and breathing whatever this business idea is that you have. And don't be concerned if you don't have a perfect pro forma or you're not exactly sure how to categorize costs or estimate revenues. You first need to have a really killer idea about how to solve a problem for a group of customers, right? We've seen that it's exemplified by all three of these ventures. And I think that's what will really help your business plan stand out. Right up front, you should indicate how it is that you came up with this idea, what problem it solves, and emphasize to potential investors or potential partners why it is that you are so interested in this and why your background helps you be the person who could potentially solve that problem and start a business from doing so.
Thank you. Trisha, how did you determine that your business model, which is so unlike your competitors, could work and be profitable? Can you unmute yourself again?
I pretty much jumped in and started without having the information beforehand. I had done a business model, but it was so far off what the reality turned out to be that it didn't work very well. But I was very committed to the idea that there could be a pedicure, that you could have a walk-in experience that was going to be reasonably close to the express salons and not $50 or $100. And I had many people try and talk me out of that and say, just raise your prices. Your store and your salon is beautiful. They need to pay for that. But I was committed to the idea that I wanted to be able to walk into a place and get a pedicure like in the express salons and not have to pay an arm and a leg for it. So I worked backwards from there and thought, how many pedicure stations will I need to have? What will I need to be able to pay my employees? And that was the biggest structure that had to be worked out, is the payment structures with my employees. So I figured that out over a period of years, and then it took volume to make it work. My business is definitely based on volume, and without the volume, it doesn't work, which makes COVID especially hard right now. So.
Right. We'll be talking about COVID a little bit later, but
right. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's also interesting to note, I think, for viewers that your plans can change greatly. It sounds like you had a plan to begin with, and as you got into it, realized it didn't really work maybe the way you thought, and you have to be willing to change it up. And you had the passion to stick with it and see what needed to be changed to work.
Really quickly, within the first 2 years, I had to expand from 4 pedicure stations and 4 manicure stations to 9 pedicure stations and 10 manicure stations.
Wow.
So but the business would have not survived if I hadn't had the space and ingenuity to get that worked out.
Yeah, that's great. So here's a question that must be on the mind of any budding entrepreneur. How do you move from a stable job that you don't love to starting your own company while minimizing your financial losses and or risks? Farah, as the most recent entrepreneur on our panel, how did you answer this question? Or maybe you're still answering it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely tough, I would say, as a student who has a lot of debt right now and will be graduating in May. I look at my classmates and peers who have stable jobs and incomes, and it's tough, but like at the end of the day, when I think about like what other job would I possibly want, there's not a job out there. Like I want to be my own boss. I want to run an apparel company. I want to see it grow from the bottoms up. And I think that's how I've decided that I'm going to go full-fledged into this, because I couldn't find something else that I'm passionate about. But also someone told me an interesting kind of analogy whenever you think about taking risks, at least within your household. They said that their partner was the one who had the stable income and they were the one taking risks. So they diversified their household income. And that's how I consider me and my partner in this relationship. Like if I didn't have my partner who was able to have that stable income and me take this financial risk, I don't think I would have been able to do this on my own. So I think it definitely takes a network and a community as well to help you pursue your dreams.
Yeah, that's really insightful. Lyda, regarding support resources, we received a question regarding pay-to-play networking. Chamber of Commerce, Rotary, etc. Can you recommend networks that would provide good value for the investment in dues and membership? And any suggestions to get the most out of them?
Oh, for sure. Full disclosure, I happen to be on the board of this particular organization, but the Women Tech Council is a really vibrant source of support, of networking, of mentors. Yes, as the name implies, Women Tech Council, it's largely been, it's certainly been founded and was designed to support women. But you know something? We welcome men as well. We welcome everyone. And the idea is really, truly to come to these events. It's up to you to decide, how much you feel comfortable trying to network with people, but be assured that those individuals who are there want to help and want to do whatever they can to be useful to the community. That's a big part of why this organization exists. And it is fascinating. We, everyone has explained that Trisha just pointed out, obviously there's been a big pivot, everything's online, it's on Zoom, but we're able to maintain community that way. And I would really encourage folks to check it out. There's also an organization here called Silicon Slopes, which is probably also designed for people who want to network and are particularly interested, of course, in the high-tech corridor that is its namesake. So I think there's a lot available there. I would also, again, put in a little commercial for the U. We do have lots of activities, opportunities, seed grant programs that I think some small business owners might be able to avail themselves of. Those things, again, have different specifications. Sometimes you might need a student on your team, other times you don't. They are there to benefit the community. And again, just please keep an eye out for activities that are open to the public here at the David Eccles School of Business, and particularly Lassonde.
I'm going to just throw this question out to all of you and maybe raise your hand so I can have you answer in an organized manner. But have any of you joined any support networks? And if so, which ones? Trisha?
I'm a member of Salt Lake Rotary, and that's a great thing to get to know other business owners and leaders. Another thing I did was I took the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program. I'm a graduate from that program. That was very helpful. If you haven't done that, that can be very informative, and it can give you the courage to bolster, opening new locations or starting a new business. Yeah.
Cool. Anyone else? Farah?
I'm a member of the Female Founder Collective. It's a nationwide program. It's founded by Rebecca Minkoff. Even though she's a fashion designer herself, like most of the companies within this collective come from a range of industries. And, there's a Slack that connects people for advice. If you need anything, like I remember reaching out about asking advice around shipping things to and from manufacturers in China. And someone was instantly able to help me out on how to navigate around the import and export laws. So I certainly find incredible values with these communities because especially female communities, we're all incredibly helpful to support one another.
We have not joined any of them, but we have hosted several of them at our State Street Indoor Cafe, which has been a great benefit. It's a great collaboration for all of them.
That's cool. So another question we received, what was the hardest logistical piece of starting your business? Leslie, I'm going to throw it to you. You had a very creative solution to one of your major challenges, which was finding more space. Tell us how you solved your need for expanding the Foothill location.
Sure. So as I said earlier, the Foothill location, when we bought it, was a very small single building. And so one of the first things I wanted to do when we bought it was make it more pronounced. It was right as you get off of the freeway and right as you're getting on the freeway. So I went in, first thing we did was we painted the building bright red. It was still very small. And as we were getting a little bit bigger, we were outgrowing it. So I knew in the coffee business, you can't close. You can't close for construction, because if you do, they're going to find a new place to get their coffee and you may lose your customer forever. So this is when the idea of shipping containers came to me. We bought 2 shipping containers and we built them off-site, got them all ready, and literally overnight came in when Bjorn's was closed with a crane and dropped each one of them into place. And one of them stacked on top of the other. So you can imagine the surprise of our customers, our regulars, who on Monday morning came and there was nothing there, and Tuesday morning came and there was 2 stacked shipping containers next to each other. But it has been a great, and we're kind of known for it now too. It's kind of the look that we've created. It was just an amazing, well-planned idea that came off perfectly and solved all of our problems.
Yeah, that's really cool hearing that story, because I drive down Foothill frequently and I've always kind of wondered about that, because it's
and now you see
very,
it,
yeah, it's really unique. It stands out and you can tell that's like a shipping container. That's really great to hear. Let's talk finances for a minute. Lyda, what are some of the local sources of seed funding?
So yeah, as I mentioned a moment ago, we actually have a pretty robust program here at the U offering seed grants, and you can Google that and you'll see there's a whole set of different programs available. So I think sometimes, certainly here in the Salt Lake Valley, there's been a lot of emphasis on tech-based startups. And there is, believe me, there's a lot going on. But, as our panelists here are expressing, there's a whole vast array of people who are starting small businesses and want to be their own boss. And I would also remind the audience that if you're interested in social causes, if there is a project for which you want to get involved in some kind of social entrepreneurship, is what we call it here, there are seed grants for those programs as well. And in fact, I think in light of COVID, the fact that so many of us have experienced some real sort of mental health issues, right? Loneliness, feeling isolated, those who have underlying depressive issues, it can be a really, really hard time. And so we have here at the U, we had seeded a program that worked on that. And this year, they moved on from that and received a very prestigious grant from the Eric and Wendy Schmidt Foundation. Eric Schmidt was a former CEO of Google. So, and again, this is not a tech startup. It really started out as a social entrepreneurship project in the mental health field. So there are lots of opportunities.
Thank you. And just as a point of procedure, if anyone has any comments, any of the panelists have any comments on someone else's question, always feel free to chime in. We'd love to hear from all of you. Next question is for Trisha. You had an accountant early on who helped you identify hidden costs. How did that help affect your financial planning?
It was huge. And I would recommend to anybody to hire a good accountant or bookkeeper when you're starting a company up. I will say when I say hidden costs, they're not necessarily hidden. They're just things that you aren't necessarily aware of when you're starting a business. I have a couple of friends that started businesses about the same time I started mine, and both of them went out of business for not paying taxes. And that's one of the bigger shocks, is when you get a quarterly tax that you're not aware is coming for a sales tax, and then it's thousands of dollars, and you hadn't prepared for that or planned for that. So a really smart accountant started hiding the money that she estimated it to be every month and keeping it in an account where I didn't know where it was. So when that quarterly amount came, I had it to pay. And then as you get more revenues and as your revenues grow, they take it from you on a monthly basis. But when you're starting out and they take it quarterly, it can be a huge sticker shock. Other things like your operating cost, your operating software costs, your merchant credit card fees. And I bet if by a show of hands, I could bet almost every business owner hates merchant credit card fees companies, and they probably all know what I'm talking about. There's so many fees that are hidden in the cost of doing your business that you're not aware of, that you need a good accountant to point out what those are and to prepare to plan on paying those, so you don't get in arrears of that and have a huge hefty bill that keeps accruing over time. So.
Farah, you encountered what must be a common financial and logistical pitfall of not planning for what can go wrong. How have you overcome that challenge? You're muted.
Yeah, I just wish I had like Trisha's advice telling me to anticipate all the things that can go wrong. As someone who's very much early stage in all of this, I think you're constantly trying to keep your head above water. And one of the things that goes by is like all these little cares about like the financial costs that are small, but they start to build up. And you just don't anticipate it. And I guess a common thing for me is like not anticipating what can go wrong. So something that I think is the next step, and it should be super easy, it will only take me a couple of days to execute, ends up taking me 2 to 3 weeks. And then now I'm like a month behind schedule on executing a certain deliverable. So I've tried to keep myself on track as much as I'm underwater on things, try to think at least 3 steps ahead, not try to think of what's going to get me through the next week, but what's going to be able to keep me on at least the next 3 to 4 weeks before it puts me incredibly behind schedule. But still, quite honestly, still something I struggle with, just anticipating what can possibly go wrong and what are these hidden costs that are going to sneak up on me.
That's a good point. Question just came in from the audience, and I'll just throw it at all of you. How do you go about finding a good accountant or bookkeeper? Does anyone have any advice on that?
I'll answer and say that I brought one with me before I had before I opened NELD, I was actually a director at the Rape Recovery Center in Salt Lake, and that was run as a small business as well. So the accountant and bookkeeper there, I asked her to come with me. So we already had a personal relationship. We knew her. And so she was with me from the very get-go on this idea, in the idea and the planning phases. I would say to go word of mouth. And by the way, that one has since retired. And I went out into the community and some of my networking, some of the people I had graduated from the Goldman Sachs program with, you just type it out there. Does anyone know a good bookkeeper or accountant? And then you get several back and you interview them. And it's much easier when you have a networking group. So.
Do any of you? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I've got very lucky in that my partner in the business, my husband, Frank, is an entrepreneur, has had many businesses, many different businesses. And he is my accountant and had a good start on all of that.
So marry your accountant is your advice.
Marry a good one.
Any other comments on that before I move on? Lyda?
I would just like to reiterate, I think this is why building a network is so important. Even if you're just trying out the idea of, I kind of like this idea of entrepreneurship or having a small business. The sooner you start just getting involved in some sort of network, I think the better off you'll be, because that's something that through our Masters in Business Creation program, we've discovered. Yes, certainly here at Eccles, we have individuals who have agreed to be resources that our students could certainly turn to. But in addition, these individuals very quickly form their own networks. And then once they leave the program, they're out in the community and they're available. And there are different kinds of accountants and that you might need given the type of venture that you're involved in. The other thing I would suggest as possible substitutes for some people may be you can take evening courses in accounting 101, learn a little bit about what it is you're getting involved in. I recognize that that's really easy, right, for me to say. It's much harder, I think, for these lived business owners who are also probably running households and have families and have all of these other demands on their time. But yeah, networking cannot be overemphasized here in terms of finding good people for you.
Thank you. My next question is going to be for Trisha and Leslie. I just got a comment. Mention that, yes, the continuing education program at the university has many courses that can support that effort. And I'm sure not just in accounting, but all sorts of things. So definitely look into that. So for this question for Trisha and Leslie, you have both expanded into multiple locations. So how did you first approach your expansion? We'll start with Trisha.
Again, I had a very good mentor helping me with it. And the thing that you need to realize is your first expansion is, I believe, even harder than opening your own business because of the multiple pathways that have to interconnect. But I'm hoping that the numbers 3 and 4 will come easier. But one thing I did when I expanded was I created what we call our mothership company, which is called NELD Enterprises. NELD Enterprises owns all of the IT ideas and, all of our logos, anything that's a creative, that I want to control is all owned by that. And that is solely owned by me. That also hires all of our employees between both locations so that I can control which location needs which employee at which time. Like if I'm slow at one location one day, I send over an employee from the other. And the only way I could do that was by having this NELD Enterprises company that networks between NELD 1 and NELD 2. I also opened a company at the time of my second expansion called NELD Distributing that buys all of the service supplies and office supplies that they both need. So NELD Distributing buys it, sells it, or buys it. NELD Enterprises buys it from NELD Distributing, and then NELD Enterprises distributes it out to NELD 1 or 2. So you can see that setting up that new process was very complicated, and it took a lot of bookwork and a lot of time to work out the kinks. But now NELD 3 and NELD 4 will already have the processes in place and be much easier to set up. But I will warn everybody that opening your second location is more difficult and more time consuming than opening the original small business. I don't know if Leslie would agree with me on that or not. So,
I do agree with you on that. We bought Foothill in 2014, and we had only Foothill for about 4 years. It took us that long we changed almost everything from when we bought it, and we wanted to perfect the menu. We wanted to get all of our logos, everything set up before we opened our second. And it was very important, location, especially in drive-through coffee business. Our location was very difficult finding our second one. When we did finally find it, it was on State Street, and we bought an old Taco Bell building. And Trisha's right, it was very difficult to go in and reinvent a drive-through coffee, and a Taco Bell was very difficult. Plus we decided to do an indoor cafe, which we had never done before. So this was starting all over again in doing an indoor cafe and introducing some new items there as well. So that happened in 2018. We now just recently opened our third location, which is also slightly different. This one's on Highland Drive. And this one is no indoor seating, but we have double drive-throughs, a drive-through on each side of the building. This one was probably our easiest one to open because it was a build to suit. So it was a piece of property that we designed exactly how we needed it to be on the interior. And that made it much easier. But our plan has always been that we wanted to expand slowly. And so we did it correctly. We have people ask us all the time, you need to come to Daybreak, or you need to come to Tooele. We can't just go from a Foothill location to our next location in Daybreak. You have to expand slowly so people understand who you are and your name and your brand is recognized.
That's a really interesting point I never would have thought of, not to expand your reach too far out of the zone of recognition of who you are. I'm going to ask a different question right now to Farah, because is your company mostly online?
Correct. Yeah, it's mostly online.
And so, not to throw you off, I don't know if you've been prepared for this question, but how do those challenges differ for you when you're mostly an online company? How did you go about building a customer base?
Yeah, building a customer base right now is particularly difficult, just in the apparel space and apparel, beauty, whatever it may be, just because the market is so saturated already, right? So thinking about building my customer base on Instagram, there are a lot of people say the influencer strategy, but then those influencers are already selling out 20 different brands. So instead of thinking bigger scale, we're thinking of a much smaller scale. So how can we tap into the more local influencers that are key influencers in your market? So say I'm operating mostly in the Boston, New York market. So finding like the quote unquote popular people that have 2,000 followers, but it may not be 2 million, but 2,000 followers are still enough to impress and influence their small friend group. And if you contact enough of those people, hopefully the word of mouth gets from there. So the strategies are a little bit different, especially on a bootstrap company. It's thinking more locally rather than on a bigger scale.
That's really interesting and kind of brings up some interesting points about modern marketing that just were not even in existence before, this whole concept of social media and influencers. And I'm sure some of maybe even our older, not panelists, but attendees to this might not even quite understand what that is. Can you explain what an influencer is in case someone doesn't understand that concept?
Yeah, so at the basic heart of it, an influencer is someone who is able to sell product to other people. I guess the most common influencer would be your celebrities, your actresses, your singers, your movie stars. Those would be the high net worth influencers, but there has been a new influencer market of so-called everyday people who have racked up millions of followers just by wearing cool clothes, sharing their skincare routines, etc. And they've been highly influential to purchasing decisions. And a lot of people, including myself, like I go on Instagram, and if an influencer tells me that this lotion is a great lotion, like I will feel influenced and feel the need to buy it. And it has changed like how people shop and how people look for recommendations. It's no longer in magazines, but rather on your social media. So influencers play a huge part, at least in my industry.
Yeah, I'm glad we got to that because that's a really interesting point for modern day marketing and businesses. Trisha, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just thought it was pretty interesting because I've been in business 17 years and my first original marketing budgets were completely for newspaper and radio. And then I moved a little bit from that towards like playbills, as that's word out and went to playbills. And then I went to Facebook and Google ads. And now I'm even moving away from that to influencers. And so my budget now is entirely spent on influencers. So it has been a very slow but steady change to that market.
Yeah, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask another question that wasn't necessarily on the script that we sent out to you guys, but just made me think of it. As an attorney myself, is something I think of, and I don't do corporate work, so it's a little outside of my field. But have any of you, along the lines of hiring an accountant, do any of you work with attorneys at all, or have there been any legal challenges that you have found in terms of, you know, setting up corporations or anything like that? And how have you just done it yourself? And do you talk to people to help you with that, or do you full on hire an attorney to help you with some of those legal questions? Anyone open to answer that one?
You know, I can say that we have not had to do that yet, but our plan was to have, after 3 locations, to consider franchising. I've had someone ask to franchise, you know, at least 5 a week since we opened Bjorn's. But our plan is a little different with franchising. We would love to be able to franchise to our own employees, people that have been with us for at least 2 years, and people who have managed a Bjorn's, because we know that to understand what we're looking for in a franchise, you would have to spend that kind of time there. So with that being said, we have started to consider reaching out to an attorney or someone to help us with the next step in franchising.
Anyone else want to speak to that?
Yeah, I would add to that. I've had to use an attorney for a couple of various small issues. And so I think it's a good idea to have an attorney on hand that knows your business model, your history, and what's going on, so they can help you. One other piece of advice: if you can open your business without any partners, I would highly recommend doing that. I've had 2 different business partners, some family, some not, one family, one not family, along the way. And it's just really hard when you have a difference of opinion of how the business should move forward. And you have some strong differences. One of those was being my commitment to saying, I don't want to be a $50 or $100 pedicure. I want to be a reasonable price pedicure. So, but my caveat with that saying is, if you are going to have partners, it is absolutely essential to have an attorney involved, creating you an operating agreement that stipulates what happens if disagreements occur, if one wants to get bought out, if there needs to be cash infusions into the business. You know, there's many different things that can happen to your business that need to have an agreed upon plan before you move forward. So if you can't do it alone, make sure you have an operating agreement created with an attorney before you start. That would probably be one of my biggest pieces of advice to anyone starting out. So.
If I can just echo that comment, oh my goodness, I have seen several instances of partners who got together, had a great idea, and had also issued a type of equity. Essentially, somebody, you know, can continue to claim that they have a share of your business, even if, you know, these partners wind up almost coming to blows. They don't even like each other anymore. They have completely different visions about what to do. And these young entrepreneurs, young meaning they're new to entrepreneurship, they are suddenly saddled with a partner for whom it is going to be very expensive to take them out of the picture. So yeah, that's a really, really good point, Trisha. Leave it at that.
Sarah, did you have something? Yeah.
I don't have a partner right now, but I think bringing on a partner, that's definitely a big concern. For me, I don't actually have an attorney quite yet, just because I'm early stage, but there's a lot of startup companies, companies that do legal services for startups. So especially when you're trying to do incorporation for a C Corp or LLC. So I used a service called Clerky. They allow you to do this all-in-one service to get you incorporated, in whatever state may be, most common being Delaware. And then they provide you services to figure out, like, how much equity do you want to give? How much do you want to give to your partner? And they also are able to suggest, like, what kind of vesting schedule do you and your partner want to be on? So a lot of these services exist just because there are so many people doing businesses and startups these days. So certainly if you're on the bootstrap route like me and very cheap, these services do exist, and they have been used by a lot of famous startups today.
Can I say something just because I
Yeah.
wouldn't want to, I can't let this go by. I actually did in starting up my second location. I do have a partner. My son and his wife are partners with me in the second location, and we didn't have an attorney to work out an agreement. So I just have to put, in case they ever listen to this or hear this, everything is working smoothly and beautifully, and we've been fine. I was talking about problems that happened earlier in the business. So I just had to put that out there.
Yeah, we don't want to cause any family wars over this.
Problems with my family. They're great partners. My child is a great partner.
Right, right. Okay, so now I'm going to pivot to what I kind of hinted at earlier, which is questions of the pandemic, which is on top of everyone's mind right now. So what are the biggest challenges you have seen with the COVID pandemic? And do you foresee with other pandemics in the future possibly, or any other big issues like that for a small business? So let's start with Lyda's perspective, and then we'll go to the owners to ask about their experiences, both with health and safety practices and financial support and also all sorts of things. What have you guys been seeing? And like I said, we'll start with Lyda.
So sure, because I have the luxury of taking this theoretical perspective on this whole problem. But one of the issues that comes up a lot is how quickly and how deeply to change in the wake of any sort of shock. You know, it can be a demand shock or a supplier that doesn't come through, whatever it is. But the pandemic has completely affected every business out there. And so I was reading an article about Jen Hyman, who is the co-founder and current CEO of a company called Rent the Runway. And it's been an incredibly successful startup. It's moved on. It's got a pretty impressive valuation. And the basic idea behind Rent the Runway is that if you want beautiful clothes, maybe you have a special occasion, or you want to really beef up your closet, you no longer have to purchase clothes at expensive stores. You can, as the name implies, rent them. And that was all working just great. In fact, the company had sort of expanded and into developing some possible brick and mortar solutions to some of these problems. They had a business model where they were actually buying clothes and then storing them themselves, so they're incurring inventory costs and the like. COVID hits, and guess what? Nobody's going anywhere. Nobody's got any special occasions. You don't need fancy clothes, and you don't even necessarily need fancy clothes to be on a Zoom call. And the business cratered pretty quickly. And at that point, she was confronted with this. Okay, so what do I do? Do I just cut like crazy? Because the problem is nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody really knows when the COVID restrictions will be overturned and will go back to normal. And if you make cuts too deeply right now, she'd essentially be behind the curve and leave herself open to competitors. The flip side of this is doing things gradually. I think this is the way, maybe I'm projecting my own personality here, but sometimes it's really hard to cut costs, and it's easier to just lay off one or two people or furlough them, or not really sit down with your suppliers and have this really tough discussion. And then the problem becomes you're in this ongoing chronic state of every day going in thinking, okay, I'm still behind the 8 ball. I still have to make some cuts. Employees walk around knowing they could be next. That cuts down on their motivation and productivity. So she made the hard decision, again, relying on a network, talking to advisors, but ultimately it was her call. She went very early, very deep, making tough cuts. And in fact, doing things like completely changing her business model, where she's no longer buying clothes. It's like, hey, it's kind of like an old consignment shop. And so she's no longer bearing inventory costs or the risks of having product that she's already paid for that she may not be able to sell. So, or rent. So it's really interesting. It was very, very tough. And, I think it's something that everyone is going to struggle with. I just recommend that with a big major shock like this, where there is a lot of uncertainty, in some senses, it's sort of ripping off the Band-Aid quickly may be a better strategy. Not easy to do, though.
No. Leslie, how about you? How have you been dealing with the pandemic?
So we have been very lucky in that we are in the drive-through business. However, every day was different. The employees were scared, they were confused, and every day something changed. There were new policies. So we decided to close for the month of April. And this was a really difficult decision for us because the day before we closed was the busiest day we had had at our Bjorn's. And the business was booming. But we needed that time to just figure out what we were going to do and get our employees feeling safe in the business again. And when we opened back in May, we opened with employees wearing our logoed masks with gloves, and we figured out contactless payments. And that helped a lot, but it took some time for them to feel comfortable. I don't think it's been until just recently, honestly, that they do feel really comfortable. And we've been very lucky. Of my baristas, we haven't had anyone, knock on wood, come down with COVID. But we also had to deal with the supply chain, which was very hard. I'm sure you all know that, you were limited on your milk purchases and different things like that. Well, that's our business. We ended up paying double for almond milks and oat milks and things like that, whereas we weren't going to raise the prices because it wasn't fair to do. So supply chain was another very difficult thing for us during COVID.
Great. Farah, how about you?
Yeah, so when I originally had the vision of Exora, this was pre-COVID, it was originally supposed to be this more retail brick and mortar experience. It was supposed to be focused more so on workwear. And as COVID hit, it was pivot after pivot after pivot. And for me, it's just showing that, okay, so apparel, like as Lyda said, apparel, we're working from home right now. So how can we show that women want to still wear clothes? They still want to dress up every once in a while. So how do we translate that on the styles and show the multi-functional stylings of these pieces? And then also, like, we obviously can't do a retail brick and mortar experience anymore. So how do we make it more tech enabled? So I'm going way more on the tech deep end than I ever thought I would, but it's also been a great, fascinating learning experience to understand how to build an app, how to talk to product engineers, et cetera. And then lastly, it's also for me as a startup, like I always envisioned, like in the next couple of months, being able to talk to investors and raise money. But right now, like the investor market's fairly light. Like they don't want to invest in an apparel company right now. And there's not investing in a lot of companies in general, much less an apparel one. So it's been realizing, okay, if I'm not going to get money from investors, like what are some other avenues for me to get fundraising? So it's allowed me to pivot and think a lot more on my feet than I thought I would ever have to. But it certainly kept me positive and very interested in still trying to make this succeed.
Trisha, how about you?
Well, the pandemic has been very difficult on my business. Is of all these businesses, mine is a face-to-face, hands-on business that we can't necessarily pivot. So we did have to close for almost 2 months, and we've now limited our hours. Now that the pandemic is, our numbers are rising again, we've got very limited hours, and we've guaranteed our customers will only have a few people in the store at any given time. So we've worked very closely with the health department and followed all of their guidelines and even gone above their guidelines to ensure strict protocols. And we've bought the acrylic shields between clients at our manicure stations. What I would like to talk about here, if I can, is the financing and the help from government agencies. And I can't thank the government agencies enough that have stepped in and helped. I was one of the original people that got a PPP loan. It was quite a nice loan, and I've gotten that forgiven. But even more than that, my favorite amount of help or subsidy was the Shop in Utah grant that came from Utah. And it was the most elegantly designed grant that I think I've ever seen. The PPP was so fast and they hurried to get it out so that everybody got a chunk and no one knew who got it and how much. This one is designed to encourage people to go to your business and encourages you to give them a free service, give them a gift certificate to walk away with a free service. And so it's basically for retail oriented customers where you are dealing with, with a client, with the public. And so right now, if I can give that Shop in Utah grant a little plug, it's been amazing because it encourages customers to come in the store. I give them on the state of Utah. People say, oh, I don't want you to give me a free gift certificate, but it's literally the state of Utah is paying for customers to come back to the store. So it got money in my hands when I needed it and how I needed it. Another great grant I got was from Mill Creek City Council, and they gave me money for just advertising. And the only thing I could spend it on was for advertising. And I've always wanted to brand my own nail polish. So Nailed is finally jumping into its own, brand of nail polish, and we're going to bring that out, and I hope enroll that in December. And thanks to Mill Creek, that's an expensive proposition. And thanks to Mill Creek, I'll be able to do that and have something that people can have in their homes, and my branding will be in front of them from then on. So thank goodness for these government subsidies and these government programs, because right now that's what's keeping me alive, pretty much. I mean, I don't want to say I would be dead without it. I'd be limping along though, and now I'm doing really well because of them.
That's fantastic. That's a good point to point out that there have been some government assistance programs, and that's cool to hear you using. I hadn't heard of that one grant that encouraged you to give out the gift certificates. That's really cool.
Go and look on their website, the Shop in Utah grant, and it'll show you all the businesses that got the grant and where you can go and get 50% off services. So
I'm writing that one down.
Yeah, I do, because it's got some great places. So
cool.
Rachel, we were also very lucky. There's some private donations out there as well. One called Tip Your Server, which we were also very lucky to get, and it's donated by Ty Burrell, and then some very generous in Utah. And several of our baristas received a $500 donation from that. So that was also very nice.
Oh, that's awesome. Good. Before we kind of wrap up, I have at least one question here from the audience that I'm going to throw to probably Farah. How do you reach out to influencers? They said, is it an organic research, or can you reach out to the marketing companies to get introduced? What would be your advice?
Yeah, for me, it's a lot of, whenever it's micro influencers, I guess it depends on the size. So influencers who have less than 20, maybe even 50,000 followers, if you shoot them a message wanting to talk to them about you and your brand, like a lot of them are willing to do it because, they're still small. Like very rarely do they ever get paid to post yet. If it's anything higher than that, most likely they're already getting paid. So they probably have an agent or of some sort. So they usually have some kind of formal email address to email as well. So I would encourage, just reaching out to as many people as possible that you would think fits within your brand and what your target market is. And then see if they'll be willing to take a meeting just to talk to them. I guess my big tip here is be as genuine as possible, because they probably get thousands of messages a day. So be genuine in what you're asking of them and what you can provide to them as well.
I have another. Do you have any comments? Yeah,
I have another question. That there is actually, and I just hurried and sent a message to my daughter, who's much more into the social influencing world than I am. But she found an app for me where there's influencers that sign up and businesses that sign up, and you can connect with each other through this app. And if my daughter, I think it's called Fluence or something, but there is an app that you can join that my daughter does, and then she sends them our way, and they can reach out to you as a business, or you as a business can reach out to them. So
that's cool.
There's a couple of businesses that do that.
Great. So we've got just a couple minutes left. If any more questions come in to the folks who are running the scenes behind the scenes, send those my way. But we'll get around to our last question. But if I see any more questions come in, I will forward those to you guys. But to wrap up and remind us that this challenging venture can actually be rewarding, I want to hear from each one of you business owners about what makes it worth it in the end to take the plunge. Let's start with Leslie.
So I would say it's hard. It's a lot of work, but it's also very rewarding. And I think that's the most important thing. My husband once said, before you start your own business, ask yourself the question, I want to ? And if you can answer that question and then go and do it in a small business, it helps, because obviously it's what you're passionate about. I like to say I wish I had done it earlier. But the timing in my life was perfect. I had raised my children, and I had the time, and I did have the resources to do it. But I also had the passion and the desire. And I think that's the most important thing.
Trisha, how about you?
I would also echo Leslie's statement that it is hard. So make sure you have the time and commitment that you want to put into this. But I'd say it is very rewarding. much more rewarding than it is hard. Not very many women get to say they get to go to work and get free pedicures. So I'm super lucky that way. But it's the most rewarding thing by far and away is the relationships that you build over the years with your employees. And I have so many employees that came to work for me when they were teenagers, and then they were dating, got married, had babies, came back to work part-time. And just watching the growth of my employees over the years has been really super rewarding. So.
That's great. How about you, Farah?
Yeah, I echo what everyone has said so far. It's an incredibly hard process, but it's incredibly rewarding. For me, I've always wanted to run an apparel company. When I was 10, I was designing clothes. When I was 16, I started sewing. And now to do this like for real and having women say they want to buy my stuff and wanting to wear it themselves, it's incredibly rewarding to see them wear something that like I helped co-create with my designers. So it's just the best feeling to see something actually into fruition and into the world. So that's what I find most rewarding.
Thank you. Before I sign off, is there anything anyone else wanted to add, burning comments that we missed that you'd like to impart wisdom? No, thank you so much. So I just want to thank our panel for sharing your valuable experience, and thank you to our alumni audience. We'll be sending an email with a link to this event recording so you can watch it again, or if you would like to share it with any friends or colleagues. And I want to remind everyone to go to alumni.utah.edu for additional networking and career resources. Thank you again to all our panelists and to all of you watching today. Stay safe and go Utes.